Greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to yet another edition of the Urban Algorithm. I'm your host, Wayne Gillman, and we've been doing this a few weeks now. We're so happy and pleased for you all to join us when you can. And before we go any further, I want you to listen to me, to know that this is the Our World Media Network that we're on, and we need for you to support this outfit. And before we go any further, I just think it's just so important that we support all of our businesses today, because I'd like to think of the United States under siege now with all the economic and political problems that we've been undergoing in recent years, especially since the transition of the government last January. And leaning on that as our theme for this afternoon, I want to welcome once again a longtime friend, good buddy of mine, a fellow broadcaster, a broadcasting executive, Mr. Reggie Thomas Jr. Welcome again, and I really appreciate you being on at the last minute here. And I wanted to have you, and hopefully one weekend we'll have to accompany us, retired Supreme Court Justice Laura Blackburn here in New York, because we all used to work together. This is my way of giving back in a way. But the theme this weekend is I feel that is so important that we have to keep in our minds is the whole issue of what Black America is going through right now in the age of the Biden administration. I feel that some of the issues that we were fighting for over the last 4 years under the previous administration we've made some successes, but things are still at a point where they're a powder keg. At any time, anything can explode. And I feel somewhat at ease because at least there's some traditional things that are going on that we would expect of an American presidential administration. But, you still have the underbelly of racism, you have antagonism, you have, terrorists, all sorts of things. And I guess where we could begin is probably the whole issue of voter suppression, because, you're in Florida, and you certainly kept me abreast of all the activities that were going on there. In your estimation, since the transition in terms of Democrats being in charge, do you feel that things are slowly changing in favor of the populists that reflect, people like us in that state?
No, I get the distinct impression that that a tidal wave of adversity is in play. Florida is right next to Georgia. I've never been a Georgia resident, but I've been a Florida resident, and I've been a resident of Texas. And it is just absolutely mind-boggling to me that in 2021 that we're dealing with this, where there's kind of like a revisionist approach to Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Absolutely unbelievable. And what people don't understand is that this is not only going to affect people of color, this is going to affect everybody. Um, you know, uh, you think about this in a lot of communities like Harlem and in Brooklyn, you have uh, uh, gentrification. But not only in those communities, you got gentrification taking place in a lot of different states. And so if you have a community that's gentrified, but then you got a Republican, uh, you know, uh, uh, stronghold where they're trying to uh, change the way people are able to vote and kind of like create a stranglehold on the voting system, it's going to affect a lot more people than just than blacks and Hispanics. Uh,
You know, you hit on something just now. I mean, the whole issue of gentrification. I mean, especially here in New York, I've seen such a transition just in the borough of Kings, Brooklyn. Having grown up there and living in what was once the largest predominantly black populace in New York, in the country,
Country.
Bedford
Yep.
Stuyvesant. And now all that is gone. I would say it's more 60-40, and I would say it's more 60% white than it is black. And there's peaceful coexistence. You still have the issues that have always been a problem in living in an urban environment, and that now reflects the entire country. But I want to think that in one sense, gentrification has been a good thing because it could show that no matter what our respective differences may be, we're all getting along. But as you cite, there are some localities out there that are strongholds of certain political ideologies, and particularly the Republican ideology, which to me has thrown me because I don't know what they represent more other than white supremacy. I mean, I never thought that those words would even cross my lips in speaking about a political party. But it is so apparent now that that seems to be the leadership's agenda if Donald Trump is to be considered the party leader, and anyone else who seems to follow that mindset.
Well, I wouldn't even. I'm not even sure that I would coin the term Republican Party. It is using that title right now because nothing else is available. But it is probably the white supremacist party. That's probably a better word for it. And the thing is that when you look at the fact that like this whole thing right now of not wanting to teach critical race theory,
Mm-hmm.
that's always been the case when you're dealing with, if you will, the general market community, never wanting to face the ugly past head on. I saw that in schools. I grew up in New York City, so I went to New York City schools.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it in the military, man. I mean, I can't believe, I when I joined the military in 1980, the end of 1980. I just finished my 6 months early. I just finished my college career at St. John's,
Mm-hmm.
and went into the military and did not realize, I had never heard the stories of racism in the military. I had never heard those until I experienced it. And when I experienced it, I did my time and I ran away like it was nobody's business.
It seems so pronounced now, but it's funny you should mention that. Now you're talking about 1980. My
1980
father,
to 84. Yeah.
83, 80 to 84.
Yep.
My father was in World War II,
Hmm.
and he talked about being in the service, different places. He was in Normandy, he was in the Philippines, he was in other parts of Europe, and things like that. He saw action, and again, he was an immigrant, a young immigrant in this country, fighting for this country. Came back to the States and couldn't get the kind of work because of his skin color that he was eminently qualified for, and but yet he was able to risk his life doing what he did. But it wasn't until he was almost on his deathbed that I realized he had such anger buried inside about how the U.S. military treated him, and certain benefits that he would have been entitled to, that he refused to even go because he knew, there was that whole Jim Crow thing going on there too.
Well, a lot of times what happened, especially at World War II, after World War II and the Korean War, a lot of soldiers came back, and you had a lot of black soldiers that came back from all the different branches,
Mm-hmm.
and they were eligible for the GI Bill, and many of them couldn't use it, especially to purchase homes. And there's an article, if you go back and look at Newsday, they talked about how black people tried to buy homes in various communities in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
Case in point, Levittown.
Yeah, I was just going to go
Levittown
there.
built for the returning GIs, but black folks could not move there. And I'd be willing to bet you this is 2021. I bet you don't have 1% black population in Levittown.
Is that
And there
right?
were
Wow.
there were three Levittown communities in the country. One was on Long Island. Then you had Levittown, Pennsylvania, and then in Bowie, Maryland, the Levitt family built a community very similar to Levittown on Long Island and Levittown in Pennsylvania. And all three were designed to only admit white GIs and their families, and no access to people of color,
And,
none
and and
whatsoever.
you would think we had several administrations. I mean, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, going forward, Republican and Democrats, and there was never an effort to just feel like fulfilling that obligation of making that situation whole for everybody who supported this country during their service in the military.
Well,
That
you
you
see,
couldn't.
this is the way I look at it. I didn't mean to cut you off, but here's the deal. When you talk about the Constitution of this country, and all men are created equal. It didn't include people of color. That didn't mean us. And when you talk about critical race theory and how race is affected, or how it's affected in this country, nobody wants to talk about that. They want to try to keep that suppressed. And the thing is that you had the U.S. government that was willing to accept the help of African American and Hispanic soldiers and military personnel. But then when everything was over, they didn't feel like what was going on. Now, take case in point, the Afghans. You had the U.S. government that was over in Afghanistan, and needed the help of Afghan interpreters to help them navigate Afghanistan against the Taliban.
Right,
Here
because they're
now everything is
cultural
shutting down.
issues.
Right. But here now you got all of the people who helped the United States that are completely freaking out because they've hit a stone wall. They're going through all this red tape. The US government had committed to these people that helped the soldiers, helped our government and helped our military people, that they would be protected if, because the US was leaving, we're going to bring you over with us. I saw on a news report yesterday that the people in the UK, the soldiers, have already admitted their Afghan interpreters into the UK. Those people are out of
Harm's
that
way.
area. Meanwhile, the people who helped the United States military and the United States government are facing this quagmire, and man, this is typical of what goes on in our country. It's just always so much foolishness. And the answer that I've heard was that these people, these conservative people in Homeland Security, are blocking what Biden's agenda is in terms of getting these people out of Afghanistan and getting them out of harm's way. I'm like, you're the president of the United States. Man, do something. Stop being part of the issue when it comes to do what you got to do. You got this guy DeJoy, who was with the post office, one of Trump's holdovers. You
Oh,
know, they're talking about how the president of the United States can't just fire him. There's a committee that has to uh, to vote to get rid of him. You got all of these things that cause problems, and nothing. It's very little that gets done.
hold your thought there, Reggie. I hate to interrupt, but we're going to have to take a break here. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the Urban Algorithm right after this.
As a dad, every day is a challenge. to make sure that the time that I have, I spend with them. It doesn't matter how tired you are, you have to try and to teach them. When they learn something new and you can just see in their faces, it's such an incredible moment. It's those moments that are my favorite.
I feel like mental health for me is a thing that doesn't really get talked about. It's harder for us to express our feelings because we're taught young to bottle them up. My name is Tobe Chukwu. I'm an Igbo boy from the southwest side of Houston, Texas, and I'm here to talk with Muhammad and Jordan about emotions, feelings, mental health. And, you know what I'm saying, we're just gonna let the spirit move.
I'm Jordan, I'm 12 years old.
I'm Muhammad. This is my stepson. I just call him my son.
As a father, it's your responsibility to lead your children into being mentally healthy, emotionally healthy.
Sometimes when I cry, I won't know how I'm feeling or why I'm crying.
I just grew up never feeling like it was okay to cry. And so he really forced me to have to reconnect with the kid that didn't get to cry.
That's beautiful. In the society that we were brought up in, it's very hard on little black boys. So you have to navigate feelings and emotions so the world don't get you. We had to learn why cage birds sing, but we fly, even though they poison us down. We don't cry, we gon' take our piece of the pie.
Yo le cuento casi todo a mi mamá.
Yo la entendería.
En mi escuela, los papás los dejan hacer todo. Mis padres son estrictos y me quieren proteger.
Puedo entender eso completamente.
Bailando entre dos vidas, el pasado y el futuro.
As they head toward the finish, Warren has built a substantial lead and headed for her 4th gold medal.
She's ahead of the world record pace by at least half a second, and she... Oh, wait, what's she doing?
I think she's doing a headstand. Why would she do that?
She's stopping. She stopped.
I've never seen
She was so close to the finish, and she stopped.
I don't know what she's thinking.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I've never...
19 minutes past the hour here at the Our World Media Network. The name of the program is The Urban Algorithm. I'm your host, Wayne Gillman, and joining us again is our broadcasting executive, our political analyst, for lack of a better terminology at this point. I've known him so long to be such a prominent broadcaster, but I welcome his opinion when it comes to what goes on in the world. We have none other than Reggie Thomas Jr., and who I've worked with for many years at WLIB, WBLS here in New York, at the NAACP. He's also ran stations in Baltimore and in Los Angeles, and he's taken time from his busy schedule to be with us this afternoon, and I really appreciate it. You spoke a moment ago about the interpreters in Afghanistan, the ones that were helping the United States. And I did hear one of President Biden's news conferences that he is welcoming everyone who were involved in that effort to the United States. And then I hear some sidebar discussion about some of these people going to Guam. Are you aware of that?
Yes, that Guam. Well, see now that the thing is that while Biden has been making it very, very clear that he is opening the door and welcoming these people who helped the American military and the American government fight against the Taliban by offering their services as interpreters. The scuttlebutt on that is that there are people in the Homeland Security, their conservative leaders, who are blocking Biden's agenda to bring them in. and the governor of Guam, as you know, the Guam is a U.S. territory,
Mm-hmm.
spoke out and said, "Listen, we've done this before. Let them come here. If you don't want to bring them to the mainland, process it and let them come here to Guam. We've done this before." And so she was offering up the services of the Guam government uh, to be able to help facilitate getting these people out of harm's way, because the Taliban knows who's been helping them, and the leaders of the Taliban said the other day that they're not specifically going after the embassy, but anybody who's left that is in support of the American government is going to be fair game as a target. And
Yeah,
that means the Afghans that have helped the U.S. government in the past.
I heard that too, and it's disturbing because you want to feel that we were on the precipice of bringing about a democracy. I've seen some of the shows on CNN and MSNBC with different people that they spoke to. I was particularly touched by a young woman who started a modeling school to make money in Afghanistan, and she fears for her life now because she thinks that once things go back to how they used to be, a woman is like garbage in their society.
Yeah, it was a very
For lack,
repressive society for
it
women,
is
for education, for business. They don't want them driving.
right.
And
Only
see, my biggest
motherhood,
concern, yeah, my biggest concern, having lived abroad, I've mentioned, you know, that I used to live in Russia.
right?
Um, my biggest concern is, so now the Taliban takes over that area, and then now what happens when they want to start terroristic activity abroad? And now they are trying to go after the planes and ships, and when I say ships, I'm talking about cruise ships,
Mm-hmm.
commercial passenger jets. I was a little concerned about it. I know that it was the president's agenda to get the United States out of Afghanistan, but I also think that we're going to have to be, as they say very colloquially, keeping our heads on swivel. You
Yeah.
know, to keep to keep attention on terrorism, because I think that that could be the next result.
No, without question, it is something of concern. And you speak of terrorism, we have our own share of terrorism, American made and bred terrorism here.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, I am so baffled. When you were talking about the issues with the post office general. Devoid, I think his
DeJoy,
name is. Yeah,
Louis
LaJoy.
DeJoy,
Yeah, I keep forgetting his name. And
DeJoy. Yeah.
I know he was a Trump appointee, and just the issues that are going on with Homeland Security, you kind of wonder sometimes if we should be an authoritarian state, because at least if somebody comes up with something sensible and it's held, to be consistent with what most Americans would want done, it'll be done. But it just seems to
No,
be so many elements, within our structure here of trying to have a democracy that they're looking to tear it apart.
no. The problem is with an authoritarian state, the authoritarianism comes in to the degree and benefit of the leader.
Oh yeah, I
So a
mean I'm
guy
clear
like
on that, right?
Yeah. So the thing is that, so no, there would never be an authoritarian state where the benefit would be where everybody would agree to stay. It's only to the leader. One of the reasons why Donald Trump uh, was so in awe of these authoritarian leaders like Putin, and the leader Erdogan in Turkey. I forgot the new guy's name in Hungary. is because not only did they run it like it was their kingdom, but they were able to exact kleptocratic um, activities.
Perfect
The stealing.
word.
Yeah, yeah. Putin is a kleptocrat, and he's
Yeah.
probably one of the biggest kleptocrats in the history of the world.
Hmm.
Um, Guys like, if I'm not mistaken, Papa Doc DeValier,
Yeah.
and probably even to some degree or better. What was the gentleman? Cuba.
Castro.
Castro. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and so Donald Trump was that was what his hope was. His hope was to see. You got to listen and read between the the lines. When Donald Trump became the president, one of the first things that he said was that he would love to be president for life.
Oh yeah,
It's one of
he
the
was
first
very
things he
open
said.
about that. Yeah.
And 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 I read that and I said, well, that's what he wants. And then he talked about, we're gonna have to talk about seeing if I can get my term extended. That guy wanted to be in there. He wanted to be the authoritarian leader of the United States. He was willing to overturn the government. Now, let me say this to you, and then you can decide if you want to do something with it or not. I served in the military for 4 years. The the My job in the military was I was a Russian linguist,
Oh,
and
okay.
so my job was protecting our country against foreign enemies. But here we had domestic enemies. And our domestic enemies should have been treated the same way we would have treated foreign enemies.
You would think.
Absolutely, and
Right.
no question about it. And that was one of the reasons why there was a civil war.
Hmm.
They didn't sit there and fight people in hand to hand combat and act like it was a tug of war. It was for real. You had bodies that were laying in the field in places like Gettysburg and Antietam. I'm not saying that that's what our wish was, but they certainly should not have treated that like that was kid gloves.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and the most recent memory of what would be the precipice of civil war was the nonsense that went on in January 6th, the insurrection. And it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to be handled because it seems like there are a number of Republicans out there that feel that nothing went on that was worthy of an investigation, you know?
You know,
So,
that's the Wayne. It was the whole thing. If you remember when Donald Trump Jr., they would say, "Oh, it's a nothing burger." That's the smokescreen. The fact
exactly.
of the matter is that one of the reasons why they rejected in having a 1/6 commission is because there are people who are serving in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate who were involved in it.
And they
Ain't
need
no
to be
ifs,
vetted
ands, or
out.
buts.
I agree. I mean, without question, it was too organized. And the thing that really is still bothersome to this day is that so many lives were lost. And you're going to turn around and say it was a typical tour. I mean, what's going on? What world? What planet? How are you smoking your drapes? What's going on here? You know,
Big question.
but
Where's the guy Ali? Where's the guy Ali? The
yeah,
one who said that, who named the three people in Congress who helped him plan that. He's nowhere to be found.
thank you.
Nowhere to be found. This was something that was planned. One of the things you got to look at is when the election was over and Trump lost. One of the first things he did is that he removed the Secretary of Defense and put that other guy in right after the election. That
Hmm.
that was all suspect to me. Because so why would you change out the person who's running the Pentagon right after the election, and you only got about a month and a half in office. And it was very clear to me. I had an argument with a very good friend of mine, very heated debate
Mm-hmm.
about the fact that I knew probably 18 months in advance that what happened on January 6th was being planned far out in advance because
Oh,
Trump did not want to leave office. So his fear was, I don't care who, he knew that he wasn't going to, if Biden was going to be his opponent, he knew he wasn't going to win. That was the whole reason why he wanted the president of Ukraine to do what he wanted him to do.
yeah, that little
To
machination didn't work out for
Right, and the
him,
guy
and
didn't come about. Right, and as a matter of fact, you want to know something? I think that President Biden has been very appreciative of that and has shown that appreciation to Ukraine because the guy could have done it, and then it would have been a lie, but he didn't do it,
right.
and as a result, there's just so many elements. See, here's the thing: there's an old saying, "God don't like ugly."
Oh yeah.
And so when you look at all of what the what they calling him the past president, uh, disgraced president,
Mm-hmm.
tried to accomplish, it was all playing against him. Now, just one other thought. I honestly believe that the people from the election in 2016 that didn't vote because they were angry at the fact that Bernie Sanders was not the nominee and they had already decided that they weren't going to vote for Hillary because their thought was she was going to win anyway. That was part of the big problem.
I
And
you
that
know,
can. Mhm.
we talked about this off mic before. I remember going back a year ago or several years ago, just having this conversation. I agreed that I mean, the Bernie followers had a big impact, but there was a reckoning with what Trump was able to pull off because even in 2016, 2017, he even stood almost in disbelief that he was able to be elected.
Well,
I
he
don't
had
know if
help.
you recall that. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
he
just
had
one of
help.
those
And
things.
if you remember, a couple of weeks before the election, James Comey
Hmm.
sounded that false alarm that they had discovered possibly these emails.
Right, and that hurt
And
her.
what was happening, and what had happened was there was so much negativism around Hillary. I honestly believe that there were a lot of people when that alarm was sounded, they went on in and did the early voting, and that was the end of it. And then a couple of weeks later, when he came back and said, "Oh, my bad. It was a false alarm." The damage was already done because a lot of people had already voted. But I honestly believe that there were a lot of people who didn't want to vote for Hillary. They wanted Bernie Sanders, but because Bernie Sanders wasn't the nominee, he wasn't on the ballot. They had decided they weren't going to vote for Hillary. The other thing is that the Russians had infiltrated social media, and so they had different spins out there. I don't know if you remember the one on Facebook where they had someone had announced that Bill Clinton had a black son,
Right, right,
and
right.
the young man looked like a younger version of Bill Clinton, but he was darker,
Hmm.
and his hair was a little more coarse. It was those types of things that the Russians were doing, and Facebook wasn't you know uh, paying attention and being vigilant. Instagram, it was all
Well,
kinds of crazy stuff.
and I agree with you, and that's a whole nother hour about media regulation. I mean, I'm still back with the fairness doctrine and the importance of having that restored in some way, and as it applies to social media as well. But at the end of the day, I still think the one big problem with the American populace, the voting populace, and we have not learned that algorithm, if you will, yet, that we have to be informed. black and white. It's just one of those things, because you didn't have a black nominee, or your person was not put in a position of power again, because we enjoyed 8 years of Barack Obama, good or bad. But the man, is going to certainly go down as one of the best presidents we've had when history looks back at his terms in office. And we certainly had our share of hysteria during his 8 years, but nothing came close to the nonsensical behavior that we suffered in the last 4 years and what we're trying to pull ourselves out of now. But Reggie Thomas, I want to thank you very much. I know we're way over time, and this conversation has to be continued. Whenever we get into it, man, it's like we could go on for hours, and you bring up so many other topics that we need to discuss. So we're just going to have you back again. Maybe we could find some money to have you return, because they don't even pay me car fare here at the Our World Media Network. I ride last class to come here, but I'm grateful. I'm only teasing. As Joey Swift looks at me and cuts me. I don't even want to say what he cut me.
Do this, man.
Yeah, but thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah. All the best. You have been listening to another segment of the Urban Algorithm. Wayne Gillman with you on the Our World Media Network. Stay tuned for our next show.